October 16th at 6 p.m., 6:01. So I'll call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum and the agenda was properly posted. There is no one from the public here to speak. And so we will discuss and consider the minutes from the September 18th Library Board meeting, which are linked in the agenda.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
There's a motion by Megan, a second by Eric. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. The old business, number 5, discuss and consider the library board's 3-year strategic plan for 2025 to 2027. And just as a recap, this is because we didn't have to consider on the last agenda, but the document has been done for quite some time. And the facilities committee, the library board, public input has all gone into this. And we talked last time about how having a document that really sets the foundation and guides our planning, is necessary. Obviously, realigning some of our strategic planning to align with the new goals of due diligence and potential library space with a learning ladder, which is not in this document, but we still felt last time we had the discussion about how it's still an important document to have. And we can obviously update it as well.
The only potential update I saw was just a reference or pseudo-reference in the vision statement, so that's page 4, that has the proposed library of the 34,000 square foot one. There's an image in there, we could take that out, because it wasn't actually referenced in the vision statement itself in there, so it's just that little bit. So that's removing that diagram on page 4.
Sure. Any other discussion? Otherwise, it is a discuss and consider.
I motion that we approve the library strategic plan document with the removal of the page 4 graphic.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Megan, second by Ally. Is there any more discussion? Otherwise, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Moving on to new business, there's discuss and consider changes to the library board's policy manual. So that is linked in the agenda. My initial CKN for October. So this is there's some track changes where there's adding just how we are, a little bit of policy about social media ad feedback and approval for doing social media ads. And then the management, policy management section was edited to give a little bit more flexibility so that when we do make minor edits, it doesn't need to come back to the full board. So this is also a discuss and consider.
But just to clarify, when you say track changes, it's not track changes, it's actually been changed.
It has been changed in there, yeah, I think
Yep.
it was accepted.
Yep,
Yep, so the
social media.
The library board president or designee will approve all social media ads was added, and then if you go down to the final policy management on the very last page, it just gives flexibility so that minor edits can be made by the library board president, and that's it.
There's one typo in the policy management part. It says in the second line, policies instead of policies.
Thank you very
I know, just.
much. I will fix that.
Otherwise.
And I don't need approval from you to fix it. I'm just kidding. All right, so there's, a discuss and consider then.
I would make a motion that we approve the revisions to the library board policies.
Seconded.
There's a motion by Megan, and second by Eric.
Just to clarify, Megan, this motion is with that change to policy.
Modify.
Change to policy manual changes.
Yes. So
Yes.
and
Incorporating edits.
Incorporating
edits.
edits and those two changes that were just discussed.
And then
Here,
All of that.
do you still second?
I still second.
All right, is there, motion and seconds, any more discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Discuss timeline and recommendations for the land transfer, and from the library board, to the library board from the Friends of the Cottage Grove Library. So I wanted to just have a brief conversation, because this then is, the land is an asset, that exists, and while the finance director and I are working towards creating this financial management plan with the goal of having it completed by mid-December, we want to make sure that we can, we're taking into consideration all of the different pieces of this project. And so what happened was in 2008, there was a sale from, so prior to that, the library board and village had investigated, I think, 18 different sites around Cottage Grove for a potential library space. Ultimately settling on the space on Cottage Grove Road by the schools that we have referred to as the Friends Land for so long. In 2008, the land, so the village purchased the land, or the library board purchased the land in 2007. In 2008, the sale was transferred to the Friends of the Cottage Grove Library, and they have been the stewards of the land until, in present day. The land is definitely considered an asset, and that the library board can ask the Friends for that land back. And in discussions with the Friends executive team, we've kind of come to an agreement, I think, in proposing this tonight, and just is up for discussion, it could obviously change, but that the Friends would continue to hold the land until the Learning Ladder site was established, and then transfer the land back to the library board, and then we could pursue a sale or however we want to manage that land, and that could then go into an endowment to kind of fund operational expenses, perhaps combined with some capital campaign money, but create an endowment that would then sustain library operations for the library. So this is not a discuss and consider, it's just more of discuss and kind of give me your feedback. Again, just for incorporating this into our strategy.
Just to clarify, when you say the Learning Ladder property is established, meaning the Learning Ladder property actually opens as a physical library, as opposed to just the passage of the referendum potentially in April?
Yeah, I think that would be
Okay.
up for discussion too.
Okay.
I don't know what that looks like. But I guess considering it an asset is something we should do. And then perhaps establishing an endowment, it would be a good financial, like long-term financial strategy for reducing some of the operational costs.
So, for me, one of the biggest challenges that I have is, again, being that good fiscal steward, in terms of recognizing one of the biggest challenges for the establishment of the library is the concern of the tax increase in there. So the sale of the land could be used to offset some of that initial increase. Flip side, I also look at it the long-term, like the endowment would be a great asset. Are we allowed to say how much it was assessed at? Is that
Right.
public?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the Friends know too. I think that right now it's assessed for maybe a little under $500,000, but there is no road access. So something I think, the library board needs to stay on top of is, when that road does become, or when the property is developed adjacent to the library land, the road still needs to go in to serve that property appropriately. But yes, this, yeah,
So give or take $500,000 is a good nest egg to start an endowment fund to help offset, again, if you talk about the interest in terms of spending that, to offset some operational costs down the line. So it could be used to offset some of the ongoing yearly asks as part of the referendum question.
yes.
So to say all that, like, pros and cons to both, and part of it for me is where do we end up with the other campaigns that are going, like, if, for example, the contract with the Sweeney Group, if we don't hit the desired goals, then that land could be enough to push us over to make it still fiscally responsible in the near term, with an idea of maybe an ongoing campaign to provide that endowment down the line. Even though it's not as sexy down the line, it's best to try and establish that early on. That is one option.
And maybe this is something that we can just include in a model too, of what it looks like in an endowment and how that, and versus an upfront contribution.
And then the other concern I have is the public relations element, the PR side of it. Why do we need an endowment?
I don't have an answer to that, but my question too is, or I guess I'm still working through what, if the Friends don't, is there language in the land deed that requires the Friends to do anything with the land? To, like, are they required to sell it back to the village and make it become a village asset?
To the library board.
To the, excuse me, to the library
Yes.
board. That is in the
I believe
language.
so.
Okay, so this is more of a matter of when
When.
that would happen, under what circumstances, and what then the library board would do with the land theoretically
guess
in the
it's
future.
Benefits upfront versus long-term
Versus long-term kind of strategy,
and then risk
yes.
to both. Like, is there risk associated with? You need to turn that.
Mhm.
I'm allowed to speak. I mean, endowments are subject to market variation as well, and typically endowment distributions are used for projects as opposed to offsetting 10% of operational expenses. So it would be if we wanted to buy new furniture for the children's room, we'd use an endowment distribution based upon the market return from the previous year.
I guess for me, it's a wait and see game to figure out the best way to utilize that asset. And for me, the biggest element is where we stand with the capital campaign.
And just to kind of give you an update on like what the timeline for a capital campaign looks like. So the first several months are really kind of identifying major donors, silent donors, to kind of hit a benchmark, and of contingent pledges in the next few months. But also initiating a lot of the upfront documents and committees and establishing kind of the infrastructure to move forward with the capital campaign. And that also includes moving forward with the 100 Extraordinary Women, which is the trademark of the Sweeney Group, which is $100,000. And then there would be a second phase to a capital campaign fundraising, which would be where anyone can donate and all different types of fundraising and that kind of thing. So kind of a three-phased approach to hitting capital campaign goals. And I think, our previous study identified that 2 million mark as what could be, feasibly raised for a library in Cottage Grove. And I guess that kind of also then moves into C under new business, which is discuss library grant opportunities. So I wanted to gauge the committee's enthusiasm for applying for grants. I think, previously in the facilities meeting, we've also identified the need for perhaps ADA compliance grants, which are definitely out there. And then there are some, there is one larger state grants, state or federal, which the village, I think, is a excellent candidate for and could be multiple millions of dollars for the renovation and implementation of a library in Cottage Grove for the capital costs. So just kind of keeping a library grant list and identifying those targets. The big grant, though, would be due in April. And I think that that's probably something we would want to work towards as the board or as a grant writer, bringing it back to the board.
I think my personal opinion is we should chase any and all grants that we would be eligible for. I say that knowing how much of a pain in the butt those grants can be in terms of writing and filling out all the stuff. But for me, it's, again, hearing loud and clear from residents who spoke up, the fiscal concern is the biggest element in there. If there's a way we can offset any of that, it's well worth us doing that due diligence, looking into it, being that good fiscal agent and being responsible.
And I think, when in terms of the financial plan, we won't know outcomes of those grants in order to incorporate it into a future referendum question. But keep making sure that we're doing, our work in identifying opportunities and then going after those opportunities be important. So, if you come across grant opportunities, feel free to send them my way, and we'll keep a master spreadsheet of those possibilities, I guess.
The big one that you mentioned, does the village staff want the library board to write that and complete it, or do they want to be part of that process? Or do we just need more information on that?
Let me have a conversation with where the expectation
Okay.
lines. I'm assuming that the current grant writers would stay on as grant writers. And I'm not sure how much capacity staff has to write grants. Okay, so moving on to D, if there's any more discussion of those other items, which is discuss library fines to provide direction again for operational planning. So when we're talking about our financial management plan that we're putting together, we have capital costs, which we just talked about a little bit in some of the assets and grant opportunities. We have operational costs, which are largely driven by people and supplies. But then there's also revenue that comes in. So revenue in the form of, can be in the form of, donations. It can be in the form of copies that are made, which we actually have a pretty good number, I think, attached to it. But this, I'd like to have the conversation about library fines, if we think that we should have them, and what some of the parameters, and making sure also that we're kind of aligning with what is typical in Dane County. And Jennifer was kind enough to do a lot of research and put together an email with some of those details. And Jennifer, I don't know if you're interested in highlighting what you found, or if you'd like me to go through it.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was just, hi, everybody. My dog, of course, was going crazy right at that moment when you brought up fines. So I'm like, mute. So excuse him in advance. Yeah, I did some research and I'm happy to share. I had hoped to come up with a spreadsheet, but that didn't happen today. So this is a little bit amateur, but essentially what I found is that the trend within the neighboring libraries is that, and I didn't realize this, I always thought Sun Prairie charged, for instance, but the trend since the pandemic, in the spirit of making access to libraries, making libraries accessible and equitable, is that libraries have gone fee-free. I looked at, you can see the email that Cindy attached. I looked at 5, 6, 7, 7 or 8 libraries near us, and each one of those mentioned that around the time of the pandemic, they went fee-free. The things that differ between these libraries, of course, borrowers are still responsible to pay for any damaged or lost items, and I think the biggest difference is the time frame in which a patron's library card usage is blocked if they have items that aren't returned. Um, it seems like kind of the typical amount of time, the grace period that people are given before those fines are assessed, and the items are considered lost, is between about 21 and 29 days, 21 and maybe 30 days. And the other piece is that when those items are returned, the fee is removed. And as far as at what point people's accounts are blocked, that with some of the libraries, and you'll see here on the notes on this email, sometimes an account is only suspended if it's more than $20 in fines, for instance. I think that's pretty much everything. Yeah. Any questions about any of that?
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually so easy. I thought I would be calling different libraries, and instead it was late at night. I'm like, let's just do a little internet search, and the information was readily available. So
Yeah, so you had looked at Cambridge, Deerfield, Fitchburg, Madison, McFarland, Monona, and Sun Prairie. So a very good spread.
yeah, and then I realized afterwards, and I wanted to make sure to get that out before this meeting, but I realized afterwards there are a couple other neighboring, like, Stoughton, for instance. I'm like, oh, I should have included that. But basically the bottom line seems to be that the library fines are kind of a thing of the past, which is, that was interesting.
So what I've heard was that going fee-free is what neighboring libraries do, but they have the patron pay for damage, and then replacement fees are associated with the accounts after like 30 days-ish.
Yeah, anywhere between 21 and 30, it seems like.
Okay. And then if items are returned, the fees removed, and then the account is suspended if there's greater than $20 in fees that accumulate.
That seems to be the typical time frame, yes. Or sorry, dollar amount, that's what I meant to say.
So yeah, the open for discussion here.
Well, I just wanted to add one thing. I was curious and looked this up, and the most recent information I could find was from 2017, so it's not super relevant. I mean, it's not 100 years ago, but it's not like yesterday. This is from the Library Journal. Libraries serving populations under 25,000, so that is what our size would be, reported an average of $449 in fines collected each month. So when we're talking about this, on average, the idea is like about $450 a month is what a library of our proposed size is actually bringing in. It's not thousands of dollars in fines. It's not a huge revenue stream, I guess, was what I was kind of coming to the conclusion when I had looked this up.
And probably even less so now, I'm thinking, if that was, you said 2017?
Correct.
Right?
That says, right, the most recent I could find that had numbers was 2017, so I would only assume that it's, especially with so many libraries going fine-free or no fee, that
Yeah.
is probably a lower average anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would think significantly lower, probably just because pretty much consistently the research I found indicated that when libraries were closed due to the pandemic, they kind of, even once libraries were reopened, they just kind of kept that no late fee policy to continue to make libraries accessible and equitable. And not have the fines be a barrier to families wanting to utilize the library. Now, one thing in Fitchburg I did notice, but this is just one, this is the only one out of that, pretty short list, that I thought was, it stood out as being, different than the typical trend, was that, Fitchburg says no refunds issued for replacement fee if the item is returned more than 6 months after the item was given lost status. And the other libraries didn't call that out, so. And 6 months is a while, but
Well, thank you again. Anyone else have
Yeah.
anything?
absolutely, my pleasure.
All right, so moving on, number 7, programming report. Tracy.
Okay, you all have the report in front of you. I will just highlight a couple programs we have coming up in the next few weeks before our next library board meeting. So you all know the community read is happening next Thursday, 6 p.m. at Granite Ridge School with Carol Dunbar in conversation with Maggie Ginsberg. Hope y'all can make it. I will probably just set up a library board table. I think going forward, our programs are gonna turn into opportunities to answer questions for the public. So I'm kind of prepping myself to do that at larger programs going forward. If anybody wants to step beside the table and help me answer questions, that's always welcome. A few great adult programs coming up. We have a virtual lunch and learn with author Chad Lewis, who will be talking about mysterious creatures from Wisconsin, from Bigfoot to vampires. That is the day before Halloween. And then on November 13th, the Dane County Library Service is going to be doing another virtual lunch and learn all about Libby. So this is kind of getting back to providing basic information about what libraries do and what they offer to kind of demystify the process for people. One more adult program, the Wisconsin Historical Series we're partnering with them to bring author Jim Drager, who wrote the book Bottoms Up, A Toast to Wisconsin's Historic Bars and Breweries, on November 7th. That will be at Grace Coffee. So Grace will be staying open late for us, and they'll have a couple different local Wisconsin beers that Jim features in his book available for purchase. In terms of upcoming children's programs, again, during I'll back up a little bit. Next Monday on the No School Day, we'll be doing 100 Pieces of Nature journaling. So this is a kind of a continuation of Centennial programming. We have a local artist coming in who will be teaching folks how to journal with nature that is provided. That is for all ages. On the 28th, I will be doing a not so spooky bat story time. I will be in costume, so I encourage you to come if you're available on a Monday morning. On November 9th, we are doing a CPR training here at Village Hall from 9 to 11. It's not an official Red Cross certification, just because that would cost us a lot of money to pay the trainer. So it's just kind of a friends and family update. So this is for ages 11 plus. So if your children are in Girl Scout troops, Boy Scout troops, or they babysit, whatever it might be, this would be a really good opportunity for them to learn those basic skills. And that sums it up for the next few weeks.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Tracy? Moving on, we have discussed and considered the approval of vouchers. The library's bills listing is linked in the agenda.
I move to approve the bills.
Motion,
Second.
there's a motion by Eric, a second by Megan. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Committee reports, the facility subcommittee, which met an hour ago. And JP will take this.
Okay, so as Cindy mentioned, the facility subcommittee met starting at 5 o'clock. Really, the big things that we discussed was the 4-year personnel planning for the library. We got some more information since our last meeting about the use of a sorter. Is highly recommended, and that counts in terms of the FTE towards our total to meet Dane County standards. And then using kind of pages was another big thing to really help kind of sort out the collections when it comes in. That was another one that the other directors in Dane County recommended Pages and Shelverpool kind of combined in there. Really recommended we have early on in there to help with the facilities in there. So we went through and kind of recalculated and ended up at a little bit above the Dane County minimum standard of 7 FTE in there. So we have a really good plan to get that established in there. We did revisit our plan of our determination of the space with the Learning Ladder site, what we thought could be upstairs, what could be downstairs. I highly encourage you all to read the memo. That was a good summary of what we thought, with one slight change of moving the director's office space kind of towards on that main floor. So level 1 is what the main floor is, and level 2 is the basement in there. So those are kind of the main things, and then there's, even before the memo, there's a couple pages that give a little bit breakdown of space based off of the worksheet that was listed above in there. The other big item we talked about was just more of an FYI about parking due to village ordinance. Currently, the ordinance would require 50 spots based on the size of the Learning Ladder site. However, the Plan Commission is planning on taking that up in their November meeting. And so some draft language is being proposed as part of that meeting, where they're actually reviewing a bunch of other ordinances at that point. So that's something that we will keep an eye on and keep you all informed. But the initial proposed in there initial proposal that might get thrown in for consideration would be equivalent to, and if you do the math, about 25, 26 spaces would be required on that site. Currently, just paved spaces there's 27 at Learning Ladder, so there wouldn't be any concerns if that initially proposed language goes through. Besides that, I think that's a good overview of what we discussed.
All right, any questions on that? So moving on to number 10, library, the president's report. So the centennial this month, we had opportunities to engage with the public at the block party over the weekend, which I think was really great. Newsletter, people had an opportunity to sign up for the newsletter. And then we also had some office hours. We always have the monthly office hours with Tracy and I. And then we had, JP and I had a little extra office hours just because there's been a lot of questions and giving people space to ask about libraries and ask about, the planning process. And so I think that moving forward, making sure that we have a lot of opportunity for the public to engage with us outside of formal meetings is important, and something we'll work into a timeline coming up here in the next couple of weeks. You all received information about advocacy and legally what we can and cannot do as library board members. And so just be mindful of how you're presenting information and under what lens, I guess. We as a library board won't be advocating for a yes vote or a no vote. Our job is to do the due diligence and present the facts, which is what is going to take the next handful of months. And then making sure that we are working closely with the village board and staff and the communications firm that the village board hired to make sure that we are all aligned with the facts and the information and are transparent in all of that. If you do have questions about advocacy, you contact me and I can put you in touch with the right people in the village. Making sure that you're not using your library board designation when you are, outright advocating, whether it's on your social media page or emails or whatever. It's just important moving forward. We will follow up with what, I do want to have a discussion a little bit about what we think the newsletter right now is programming specific, and how we think we can also use that to educate the public as an option. I know that's something, we started the newsletter in January, in the beginning of the year, and we've been slowly increasing the number of people that we're reaching with the newsletter as an option. So having a discussion and giving Tracy some direction about newsletter content and then also frequency. Right now it's sent out at the beginning of the month and it's very program specific. But if we'd like to use a portion, I mean, I know the very end of it says when our next meetings are, but if we want to use the top portion to provide updates or bullet points or something like that, and then do we want to potentially increase the frequency if when new information becomes available, and what you think is a good balance?
For me, I think one of the big things is what is the intent behind the newsletter? Is it really, do we want to keep it as that programming, that awareness piece of the things that Tracy's is doing in terms of the plan, and they're kind of helping promote that? If we're opening up to all things library, then it makes sense to have a section, whether it's quick hitter on the top or on the bottom, in there, or, I mean, or you can do like a happy medium where you still keep it very much programming based, but then on the very end, you say, and here's the latest update on the library process. Sticking to the communication plan, sticking to the whole, what Cindy was mentioning about the advocacy, we would follow that kind of element of informing the public. What's the public information? What do they need to know in there?
I think I like the idea of maybe keeping it, programming based, but yes, having a standard section or standing section for the latest updates to inform the public.
So does that mean you envision it still going out the first Tuesday of every month, even if there is new information on the library planning process that's relevant midway through the month?
In my mind, you're gonna miss something. This is gonna be fast moving. There's always gonna be changing, new updates that come in. So this is where maybe the communication plan comes into play a little bit more, of what's the central place for information. You can have that section that says, as of this date, here's the latest in there. However, this is a fast moving project. For more current and updated information, please visit.
Yeah,
Yes,
which will all be established.
yes. I was gonna ask, like, what of this newsletter do we need to, oh my gosh, the words are not coming, work with the communications people who are doing this stuff as well and have our plans aligned and that kind of thing. I would discourage us from sending out multiple emails a month as a newsletter thing. I think the newsletter is meant to be one monthly email that people who have opted in receive from the library board, with primarily programming information, the little blurb at the end that JP suggested. And again, if you are interested, there's information on social media, there's information in the paper. Everyone is given lots of opportunities to stay informed on what's happening. I don't think we need to send a 90-page email every time Cindy has another meeting.
Sounds good. I'd agree with keeping it to once a month, unless there's something very dramatic that we need to communicate out. But in reality, if we are putting together open houses and, and the web page is being, the village page of the project is being adapted, like that can just be, I think, the once early in the month will give people enough information. And it's not gonna be the primary source that people are gonna, and we don't have the followers on the newsletter right now, but continuing to remind people to sign up for the newsletter, so they can become more engaged with library and services in Cottage Grove is important too.
Cindy, may I also ask for some direction then on social media as well? Right now, as you all know, I'm pretty much exclusively using social media to promote programming. Every once in a while, I'll throw in, a a library-related service that's happening in Cottage Grove, or talk about what area libraries are doing or what their hours are. Should I refrain from posting any updates on the Village of Cottage Grove Library Board's Facebook page?
This is just me personally saying it. I think, yes, you should refrain from posting too much on there because it skirts too close to the line of advocacy as it is, knowing that the library board is trying to do its due diligence and make sure that we are finding out the accurate information. And it's not as if, I think there's gonna be enough formal avenues to get communication out there. I don't think we need to continually be updating that page again on all the small steps that are happening along the way, because there's often then just more and more questions and things that we don't have answers for, especially with so much of this process happening so quickly.
And it's not our job to engage with the community over social media. I do wonder if there's maybe a happy medium in which we create a one-time, this is where you find the information and this is how, these are
Yes.
where you find, this is how you find
That's
the agendas,
established.
this is, and then we just pin that in the featured and it stays, and it lives there.
Yes. And if for no other reason too, like your job description does not, you have enough things on your plate.
Right.
You being Tracy, like that job description is already full.
Devil's advocate view, though I mostly agree with Megan. The one element is if the library board hosts any open houses,
Ask you.
Yes.
would that, I think that would be
Yes.
allowable to promote how we are hosting an open house to talk about the library process. That's as far.
an event. Sorry. I mean, to me, that's programming. That's a library board event that's happening that makes sense to be sharing on the Facebook page, which is also sharing all kinds of other events primarily. Most of what we share on there is events. It's not informational updates. It's not, there are places that people can go to get that information. And I think the library board in general has done a good job at being transparent and offering as many avenues for people to get the information and make it very obvious that they're willing to engage, answer questions, explain processes, all of that kind of stuff.
So when we have scheduled library board information sessions, I'll treat that as I would any other event. I'll make a Facebook event with a graphic,
Yes.
similar to what we did for office hours.
Yes.
Got
I think that, so a social, you could do a post on how to find information once we have that figured out from the village level, just to make people aware and pin that to the top. And then when we do have library board information sessions, treat them as events.
Got it. Thank you.
I did want to just give you kind of a brief overview on maybe some of the things that are happening in the next couple of weeks, which would be JP and I meeting with the architect at some point to start to do some of the walkthroughs, working with the financial management plan and continuing to kind of refine those. That's going to take months still. Working to define again open houses and kind of that process and really the timeline between now and middle of December, most likely, and what that would look like. So we can bring that back in November for discussion and updates. I think, our next meeting, well, we can talk about future meetings, I guess, in a little bit. But that's, I think all I have for the president's report at this time. Friends report, which we want to talk a little bit about maybe transitioning this off of the agenda as a standing item.
Sure, I think as we're moving forward, we've talked, the Friends Executive Board and some of us on the library board have simply talked about the sheer quantity of things we need to get done at these meetings, along with the fact that the Friends group does not necessarily have a lot of information that they need to like relay to the library board in a meeting in this fashion. They had asked if we could still share about specific events they have coming up, just so that people on the board and others are aware, anybody watching the meeting. So I think that makes the most sense and is the best use of everybody's time and resources. So the only thing that they have coming up that they would like to share is they're doing a Culver's Night as a fundraiser on November 19th, which is Tuesday night. It will run from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. And if you are interested in volunteering your time, just shoot me an email and I can get you the Sign Up Genius link so that you could.
What date was that, sorry?
No, it's fine. Tuesday, November 19th. And obviously it's the Culver's in Cottage Grove.
And 4 to 8 p.m.
4 to 8 p.m., yes. That's it. Any questions?
So future meetings, so both the facility subcommittee and the library board meeting are scheduled to meet at 5 and 6 p.m. respectively on Wednesday, November 20th. And I just want to also clarify that if there is a need for an earlier meeting based on new information or based on something that we need to accomplish, there could be the potential that we would have, we call a meeting between now and then. So just kind of keep that on your radar. And then our December meeting is December 18th, and that is the annual programming workshop as well. So future agenda items. So budget updates, architect updates. Communication.
Jody Sweeney.
Plan updates.
I guess we'll just call it due diligence updates. Which I now spell that word wrong too. I spelled centennial wrong for the last 6 months. Now I'm spelling referendum and diligence wrong. It's okay, I have a PhD. Okay. Anything else to consider when I make agendas for next time? And perhaps too, by November 20th, we would have plan commission or updates, parking to put on the library board agenda. Anything else? Okay, so we are number 14.